I mean, you're translating that, but to what extent are you translating? The other trick that is believed in seriously is taking a piece of documentation that's often used by people that are not comfortable about language or too lazy to paraphrase. They take a paragraph or something, push it through automatic translator and push it back. And then they clean it. Greek into English. And then in the translation, some things get missing or messed up. So you take that reworked one, and probably, not probably, according to some of my sources, doing it through more than one language is useful. So you send it off through Greek, and then you send it off through French and back. And by that time, it should be superbly mashed up, and you can then get the words nicely aligned and make sense, and it should have very little to do with the original. Okay, but the biggest thing about cheating scheme, it's not fail-safe. This whole thing is absolutely, unfortunately, not fail-safe. So no matter what you do about it, there are ways to slip through. Language being the most prevalent one. I believe that Google Books is the issue. And then also nothing that is not in the database won't get checked. So a lot of the masters and doctorates until very recently, and even now at this point, a lot of those masters don't get handed in electronically, and they are not available electronically. So if you use, say, a doctorate from 5-10 years ago, you can copy quite happily from that, and it won't get picked up by Turnitin. So that is a serious weakness. And the other thing is that a lot of master's documents even now don't get turned in. So unless another university has forced the master's or the honours work to be sent through Turnitin, that student work will not be on the website. What's also important is when you pick up some other university's work, you will not be able to see that automatically. You have to send a request to that university, to the lecturer in charge, to ask for permission to see that original work, to interpret whether is the issue there. So a Turnitin report is not going to carry the case about plagiarism unless it's absolutely directly quoted. But it gives you a very good idea. So what we've done, we've basically put a little diagram together to help people to analyze it. It's very difficult when you see this Turnitin report to decide what exactly should you do. So, top right, you should put out what the current similarity is. Very often you start excluding things until you see, but if you look at that, if you look at it, if it's at 22%, you put 22%, and then you have to work out where that 22% come from. And from the bottom up, the ones that are not serious is using a template or standard form. I dedicate this to, I thank these people, the table of contents, and those structures tend to come out quite often. The next one is the everyday use. What has happened? What are you using? It said no action necessary. I particularly believe that policy, that law specifically falls in another area because you still have to refer to that. Okay. So using legal source that is a reputed source is slightly different from using things that's in common use. Coined phrases, the way people put that research methodology, those standard phrases, is also, you can say no action necessary there. Appropriate brief quotations, acceptable. Now, if you start seeing your own work or the student's own work or direct matches, you need to evaluate that. You need to go and look at that and see if that is an appropriate point for a student to have borrowed from, say it's assignment 4 that's been copied over, or if it's not. Inaccurate referencing, that's problematic. They've got to go fix that. Direct longer quotation without quotes is a serious issue and needs to be fixed. But what happens if you find plagiarism? That needs to be addressed. Now, the university's plagiarism policy applies. Typically, at a master's level, there's a warning. but it's got to be a written warning. So if you detect it, it's no good to say that I have found that previously. This kind of report has to be available. Okay. And you have to go through that, because the moment you have signed off that the student may submit, which is what you're going to do when they're handing their proposals into the departmental, you're basically saying that you've checked it. So this is just to make it a little bit easier for yourself. If it is an issue, you need to go and look at that and try and see whether it needs to be rated, and there should be a warning. There should formally be warning systems. So if we look at that, I've now worked for it the wrong way around. There's a percentage that you can put, and we've basically put some notes onto it. What you need to put is in the far right column of the document, you have to basically say what notes you have recommended, and the student have to sign it off. So there's a report on it, and that report can be filed and is formally on the system. It's important that a lot of students believe that their proposals and things like that is not seriously, because it's not been handed in for examination. It is still an issue. If you haven't got it on record that you have told them during the process, it may have very serious consequences for the university.
So this is a very good way of keeping track of it.
Keeping a track.
And also proving that you have actually pointed the problem out to the student, and you have actually trained the student.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems around that when academics say, but I have told you about this, I've shown you this, I have indicated this on the feedback that I've given you. Unless you've got that recorded, it's still difficult to prove. And plagiarism cases are notoriously nasty and bitterly fought. Okay, let's look at some of the practical issues. The points there is one to the turnitin.com, but I think the most important one that we want to go to is this presentation, which we can watch somebody else performing instead of me.
Oh, sorry, no, I can't get there. There. Okay.
Are we going to look at the, okay.
UOIT's Teaching and Learning Center's Teachtorial.
Sorry, I just want to set the volume up.
Teachtorial on reading the originality report and turn it in. This is one screencast in a series of tutorials designed to help you use Turnitin by reviewing the originality report for matched text entries and how to interpret the results. Let's get started. I'm going to log in to Turnitin.com with my email address and password. I'm taken to the instructor homepage where I see a list of all my classes. The class that I'm looking at today is ABCD Class 1. I click on the class to go into the class homepage. The link that you're going to click on now.
Okay, I'm just going to go and fetch speakers. Come on. Will you take a shot of everyone here?
Welcome to UOIT's Teaching and Learning Center's Teachtorial on reading the originality report and turn it in. This is one screencast in a series of tutorials designed to help you use Turnitin by reviewing the originality report for matched text entries and how to interpret the results. Let's get started. I'm going to log in to Turnitin.com with my email address and password. I'm taken to the instructor homepage where I see a list of all my classes. The class that I'm looking at today is ABCD Class 1. I click on the class to go into the class homepage. The link that you're going to click on now is the view link. This takes you to the next page, which is called the assignment inbox. This is where you will find all of the assignments that your students have uploaded. We've uploaded 2 assignments, one chemical reactions and the other Freud and Skinner. You can have a look at their papers by simply clicking on the title of the paper, which then opens up the document viewer. And you can see the paper as it is without being marked up with any of the text that is similar to other sources. Over to the right-hand side, under Report, is what's called the Similarity Index. This percentage tells you how much of the report or how much of the paper has been plagiarized according to Turnitin. Keep in mind that Turnitin does not really detect plagiarism, but rather it detects text that is similar to another source in its repository. We'll have a look at the report in 1 minute, but just to help you understand the different colors and the percentages, Turnitin considers the following when it looks at the similarity index. Anything from 1 to 24% will be highlighted in green. Anything from 25 to 49% will be highlighted in yellow. Anything from 50 to 74%, such as these, are highlighted in orange. And anything above 74% will be highlighted in red. Gives you a vague idea of how Turnitin determines the similarity index and its relation to how much of the paper may be plagiarized. So I'm going to have a look at the chemical reactions paper, click on the percentage, and that takes me to the originality report. You're offered a window before you get to the actual report to give you a tutorial or a 4-minute walkthrough of the originality report. It's highly recommended to watch this. So here it is, what you've been waiting for, the originality report. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see the actual paper itself with highlighted areas that are the areas that Turnitin considers to have been plagiarized. On the right-hand side are the sources that matched to those entries on the left-hand side. So if we look at this paper, the first paragraph looks fine, no problem at all. The second paragraph, third paragraph, and most of the fourth paragraph have all been linked to source number 1, which is over on the right-hand side, called www.gotessays.com. And you can see that 55% of this paper is matching to this website. On the right-hand side, you can get more details about the website or the internet source or the publication or a student paper or whatever it's matched to by clicking on the little arrow to the right of the percentage. It now shows you a list of other places where it has found similarities. This shows you that a certain number of different areas have taken work from gotessays.com. Notice on the left-hand side, it has expanded the text from the internet source itself so that you can compare it to the text in the paper. So here it says later in the 17th century, a German chemist named, and over here it says later in the 17th century, a German chemist named. So your student has copied this directly from this source. I can go back to see the other matches by clicking the arrow to the left of match.
Sorry, the internet is just slow today. I don't know why.
breakdown. And if I wanted to see the second match, which is okcupid.com, I'd double click on it, and over on the left-hand side, the paper opens up to the area where that text is similar. In this particular case, you notice that not all of the text has been copied, and somebody may have done a half-decent job of paraphrasing as opposed to actually stealing the text from someone else, in which case we would be looking at plagiarism. Note on the right-hand side that this particular internet source has been 12% used in this paper. Let's have a look at a publication. 1% of the paper has come from this publication here. Again, I can click on the arrow to go to that particular publication and see it showing up here. Well, this is not really an example of plagiarism, and this is why it takes a human eye to look at these originality reports as opposed to the percentages. Now, this is not a high percentage, it's at 1%, but if that was a higher percentage, you could say that maybe it's not all the way up to 71% similarity index, and you take into account that some of the similarities are perfectly acceptable. So that's one of the reports. Let's have a look at the second report, the Freud and Skinner. Again, I'm going over to where the similarity index is shown, and I'm going to click on the index to have the paper and its matches show up. On the left-hand side is the paper, on the right-hand side are the sources. And again, you can tell right away from this paper that this particular student has gone to an internet source called echeat.com and has captured a lot of information. If I, on the left-hand side, if I scroll through the paper, I can look at all the different ones, and I can see that that was a huge source of information for this student. But there are other sources here, including student papers. When you click on the arrow for student papers, you get a message here. This was submitted to Westminster College. Your message says, because submitted papers remain the intellectual property of their authors, instructors, and respective institutions, we are unable to show you the content of this paper at this time. If you would still like to view this paper, please click on the link above to submit a permission request to the
Nearly there.
author's instructor. In other words, if you click on this link, you will be given an opportunity to submit an email to the student's instructor from this particular paper. Let's go back to the match breakdown and notice that there are two other papers that are similar. If I double click over here, I am taken to the area that is similar over on the left. And again, your eye tells you that's not a huge problem. The rest of the paper is, but this is not a huge problem. So number 6, I'm not too worried about. Number 5, looks like it's just taken it from a reference. And I don't see any other 5s throughout the paper, so 5 and 6 aren't a problem to me. Number 4 is 2%, and this is simply the use of the two names. And I don't see number 4. Oh, I do see number 4 showing up here. But I don't see that as a problem either.
Can I go my stop now? Okay.
So
the reference to this is in the slides anyway, so you can go and watch the video, you know, on your own time again. Sorry that the connection wasn't so lekker. I just want to show you that when you use when we use Turnitin, you basically have to go to the subject to needs marking as you've been going, and then this is what you will get. So you will get assignment. This is an individual literature review, and then the user's paper is the one that she showed you that has no writing up, and then the originality report is the one that you are interested in. Okay, and unfortunately, let me see if I close some of these other things, whether it will now open it for us. But so the originality report is that report that she talked you through, and let's hope we can get one up, and then Maria can maybe just talk us through it. We've got one. There we go. So now you can see how badly my students learn to do literature reviews.
Okay, let's look at this. I must wire up again.
Yeah.
Now you're wired for sound.
Now I'm wired again. Okay, so here we have a 16% match. And if we go there, see what it is, where it is. Now I'm moving it up and down, and as we know, the internet is not our friend today. It goes to Science Direct, and it shows you exactly what it is, and you can quickly scan through that and see if it's an issue or not. If we go back, Turnitin, yeah. So you can start seeing what is this. There's a 16% match with that. And the fact that it's an article, that it's that important, tells you that there is something that you have to go and look at. Is it because the person didn't quote correctly? Is it because they were clumsy with the paraphrasing? And we know that we sit with students, and many of our students that are not English first language speakers, so for them it's a very difficult issue. So you have to be very careful to make sure that that's not only because they're clumsy in paraphrasing, but you can use the report by telling them, listen, this is the amount, say 16%. I don't say that that is, say, a direct plagiarism issue, but you are clumsy in paraphrasing. Let me bring it to your attention and have you sign for it, that you need to spend more time in trying to paraphrase it correctly. If you look at that, it's publications. But now let's look at this kind of thing. Student papers. What is the issue here? It's a standard phrase. It's part of the template, and it comes up over and over again. This is one view. You sometimes get them in this view or differently. So if you start looking at that, then you can see there's a 3% match. Is that an issue? A 3% match. Is that an issue? Don't want to go through it too much. Let's go from the bottom. Typically you start from the bottom. Student paper from, let's go to 20. Okay? Template. 1% match. Aha, this is a bit of a scary one, isn't it? Or is it not? What do you think? Is this an issue or is it not? Looks like direct words, but it's probably sloppy referencing. It could be, if that's not a pattern, that could be sloppy referencing or just bad paraphrasing. but that's not probably very seldom that you're going to say something like that on its own is plagiarism, but it's a pattern that you're trying to build up. Okay, now can't see this, must probably look at the thing. Okay, student paper again, which was this. Because submitted papers remain the intellectual property, you're not going to be able unless you're going to go back there. Where do I close that one? Next match. Let's try and see if we close. Let me read here. Okay. So you start looking at these publications. Is this an issue? And you go through them one by one, and you try to see if it is seriously issue. And my view would be that here you can look at it and you can start seeing where exactly you can get hopefully the full text if you're on the TUT website, but otherwise it could be issue. But then you can start seeing whether it is such a massive issue. Okay, let's go back. So we've got a 59%. So whatever comes here in the form should be 59%. And if you go through that, you want to say first, how many percentage did we see? 5 here. Number 5 tells me that there's a 3% match here on this kind of form. So you can start seeing whether that is the issue. See, they've just changed the date. How terrible can they be? So then...
And 15 is the same. It's also part of the template.
Yeah. So you go through that and you actually aggregate. I'll try and clean this up a little bit more so it's easier to use, but you aggregate whatever the sources are, and you can then, you're in a position with this because you can print it out. Now the problem about printing it out is unless you've got a color printer, you can't follow the codes that easily because it uses color quite extensively. But you can print it out and you can add that as a piece of documentation. And I would recommend that as you have conversations with your students, you actually do that repeatedly.
Can I just show something else? You can also download it in PDF format. And this is what it looks like if it's downloaded in PDF format. Okay, so you can see that I commented and the student didn't even accept my comments, and then it got put through Turnitin, and so it shows what the issues are. So you can also send that to the student, and they will be able to see what the issues are.
Is there anything we need to look at specifically that somebody has a... This is basically, you've got to work through it. You've got to work through it, you've got to look at your own, you've got to understand what it is, but you cannot use it to say 59% this person is bad, plagiarism, full stop. You have to look at the detail. So, and even if you start looking at some of the templates, you can get a fairly high percentage out of standard templates, out of quotation that is important. And you need to go through that and you need to discuss it with, or report it, discuss it with the student and report it. That's basically the only thing. It's not very difficult, it's fairly straightforward.
You can also exclude.
Yeah.
You could say exclude small matches.
Yeah.
There.
Where's the, yeah.
Sorry.
There's the exclude.
Yeah. So there you can decide.
So highest matches together. So if you look at that, it tells you, if you go back.
Sorry, it's the internet is slow.
Okay.
So
It would show you together so you can see if it's been peppered throughout the area, if it's a single place. If you look at that, you can have the classic report. You can also say, exclude the bibliography so that you don't see there's an issue. Exclude directly quoted.
So if it's properly done.
Then you can see. And I would recommend that you do that. When you look at it, but overall in reported, excluding small matches, and there you can decide how much they are allowed to copy without being a problem. But overall, I think that the first few ones you don't want to exclude. You really want to play with it quite extensively.
But the other nice thing is there are nice tutorials and videos and everything.
And
on the
Turnitin.
Turnitin site. So you can go and watch them.
if I don't know if it's a problem, I personally have a Turnitin password, okay, because I needed it for some of the past-graduate students' work that I had to put through. But so I don't know to what extent you can see everything on the Turnitin site if you don't have a password.
You
If
can.
you need a password,
No, you
just
can.
send Rizal an email and she will arrange a Turnitin password for you.
It's probably worthwhile because without a passport you can get anything there. They just go through the systematic trawling of information from you. So this time you have to add this bit. How many?
Yeah, Rizal, I forget her surname, but if you just put R-E-Z-E-L and check it and she will, I think it's Janssen van Rensburg or something. Canvas is yes.
Okay. Should we go back to, is everybody happy? No unhappiness, no uncomfort here. I just want to go through this and then, so that was the one we watched. If you go with Turnitin, that's the specific. So just go to turnitin.com. You can get nearly anything there. It's a bit difficult to find the straight originality text check information there because they tend to have all the other products there. But there are webinars that are recorded and you can go through them. There's also a very well structured webinar about the specific white paper around where you find it. Okay. Does anybody have problems with assignment 3? I don't think there's anybody here because most people have actually attended the sessions. So I'm not going to go through that. The students were told that they can hand this in later. Now, what has happened, and I think you've all seen that assignment 1 was probably not a pleasant experience for a lot of students, especially the ones that have not really engaged with the area that have just newly started. So they really struggled. But I think the biggest surprise was among the students that thought they've already engaged with the topic. But when they were forced to put it down in exactly this format, they realized they haven't thought about it. They couldn't get down to a single problem statement. It was a lot of waffle around the problem statement, but not clearly articulated. And until they've got that clearly articulated, they cannot go forward and start looking at their primary research question and then analyze those questions to see what needs to be addressed where and which ones will be the research sub-questions in there. So they were said that, well, they were told that they had to resubmit assignment 1, I think by Monday. I don't know if all of them did. Okay, that's probably the 10 that we've already spoken to. But it's very important. We really can't force them forward if they haven't engaged with the problem.
So we have sessions this afternoon with some of the students and we have 14 sessions tomorrow. We had 17 sessions on Saturday and I think this afternoon we have 7 or 8 and then tomorrow there's 14 where we sit one-on-one with the students and you're there. So,
yeah. So the idea is you can sit with them or they can come and then we just discuss, but it is preferable that the supervisors are also there because it's much easier. We don't want conflicting messages to go through to the students. They are confused enough without adding another layer that's not necessary. So we're doing that around it.
and please just be aware that if the student comes and talks to us by themselves, we tell them that you have to clear this with your supervisor.
You've got to go
If you're going
back.
to change your topic, you have to clear it with your supervisor. If you're going to change your direction, you have to clear it with your supervisor. So if they tell you anything to the contrary, they are not telling the truth. Don't say they're lying.
Okay. The other thing about assignment 3 is that a lot of supervisors are getting their students to actually choose their research questions and then they try and analyze the research question. The purpose of assignment 3 is basically to make sure that they've covered all bases. So we want them really to generate as many possible as questions as potentially so that we can make absolutely certain that they've got their scope clear, they've got their delineations clear. So they shouldn't be looking at only the most important questions. They should have all those little nitpicking ones. That they have the delineation clear, and then do they know where the research, their literature questions are going to go? What's driving the literature question? where the assumptions are and whether it's a limitation. So a lot of the students are thinking that they don't have to put every question in there, but I think we've discussed with the ones that have done it. Now, what is important here is assignment 4. We have told that there's 2 layers of it. Ultimately, we want a 10-page document from them. Now, I think in the original one we said a 25-page literature review, and it's clear that not all of the students are going to be ready for that. So at this point we're telling them a 10-page, but some of the students may in fact have the whole document. What we also then did for them is a very, very clear template, and I just want to go through that. This is a template that tries to get them to do their literature review and report on it in a way. We want them to introduce a literature review. This is part of chapter 2, so it's really not required at the proposal phase, but we want a decent background. It's got a link to chapter 1 if you put it together. You must be clear about your objectives. You must know what you're trying to do. It's probably the most frustrating thing in the world to read literature review chapters. And you read those things, you don't know what the students are trying to say, you don't know why they are looking at it, and they bombarding you with literature and bits that you don't know where does this fit into their whole study, and you can't see a cohesive. So we're trying to give them a structure. This is not the only structure. This is just a very useful structure for students that struggle in the beginning to work on it. We do want them to have their objectives, which they found from assignment 3. We want them to give a background of what literature they've looked. I think that's one of the things that we find in the feedback with the students, that a lot of them did not understand where they should look for the literature. We actually want them to put down the methodology of how they've done this literature search, so that you can see that they've done it thoroughly and they can think about it. It's amazing the moment they start putting it down, how they've done it, how they go back and do it better. So once again, if you put it through. We do want the research methods in the problem area, because it will give the guys a decent idea of where to go look for what research method would be appropriate. And then the next headings, first one is a background to the problem, and if you're at the doctoral level, this is where you really have to go and defend where you're adding the knowledge. And then we want assumptions a little bit, or definitions, assumptions, definitions, what are you using? Then you're going to go through, and now we say 1 per question. So there's a paragraph for every literature question that they've identified, that they have to talk about it. What we're doing here is we're trying to force them to pull together literature from various sources around a common theme. And that identification of the theme is very difficult. If you're comfortable in the area, you can pull literature together on a theme, but if you don't, it helps them to do that. And then per empirical question and then synthesis. Now this is a bit of an issue. I think I was quite shocked to see that there were actually students that had less than 5 papers in their assignment 2. I mean, they were told, they were guided from the beginning, which was before the last holiday, that they have to be reading, and some of them still struggle with that. So I think what we have basically agreed is that although some of these students, and we're hoping to have a yield of about 30 for the first round, will not be able to get their proposals in for this first round, they will be allowed to carry on, and we'll be working with them to make sure that they can actually present the proposals in later. So you will be asked at some point, we're not going to tell them now, but you will be asked at some point whether you recommend that the student hand in. If you feel uncomfortable about the student's work, they shouldn't hand in. It's not the end of it, it's not a failure. They have another, I think after, it's 3 months from then, 2 or 3 months, there's another opportunity. They are obviously, it's going to be difficult for them to arrange another departmental session of presenting, and that will be your own choice whether you want to have all of the students presenting, the bad ones as well, and that's a departmental decision, or only the ones that are good enough. But I think within a department, it would be helpful if you make a single decision, and I think it is useful for the students, even the guys that are not that well, to get doing that well, to get feedback from more than one source. But it's your decision on how you want to do that. So we are at this point hoping for about 30 of them to come out at the right time. Sometimes I must admit that one despairs.
We do have 62 enrolled, just to add that.
Yeah, so it's about
I'm not sure if my student is still there.
Sorry?
I'm not sure whether my student is still there.
Let's try and see. You want to quickly go through
Now you can stop the recording, I think.
Okay, stop the recording. Okay, thank you. And you can stop videoing me.